The Early Childhood Development Action Network is a growing global network of networks with over 100 partner organizations and over 5,000 members from more than 120 countries, dedicated to improving the lives of young children and their families. ECDAN provides a platform for partners and members to learn and exchange knowledge with each other, to coordinate advocacy efforts and work and find opportunities for collaborative action at scale. We are delighted to be working with the Global Partnership for Education and UNICEF through a new GPE KICS project and looking forward to being the learning platform for this collaborative effort. This webinar is the first of a webinar series on scaling pre-primary education. Ladies and gentlemen, although ECD is recognized as the foundation of human capital development, we are not investing enough in the early years, and nor is pre-primary adequately integrated in the education system. Before COVID-19, 175 million children were not receiving pre-primary education. And COVID-19 has had huge impacts on young children and their parents, as it disrupted work and home life. Families have to balance work and childcare responsibilities and manage the impacts of overlapping crises, including economic insecurity and social isolation. As a result, many parents are struggling to provide adequate nurturing care to meet all their children's developmental and learning needs. And with closures of schools and childcare services and playgroups, young children are missing important social and cognitive development and learning opportunities. We are all concerned about school readiness and the long-term consequences to children over their entire course of their lives and sobering implications for societies. The launch of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit is therefore very timely because of the urgency to act quickly to reconstruct back better and differently with inclusive solutions that are more permanent and effective to address the current learning losses being experienced by this generation of young children. Although children are resilient, failing this generation of young children is not an option for us. I have the pleasure of inviting our partners, GPE and UNICEF, to give a few remarks. I would like to invite Alice Albright, the CEO of the Global Partnership of Education, to say a few words. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your kind remarks and your introduction. Let me just once again make sure that people can hear me okay in case we need to make any adjustments. So hearing none, I'll proceed. Again, thank you, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this very important day as we celebrate the success of BELDS, which for those who don't know what the acronym stands for, it's Better Early Learning and Development at Scale. I'd like to start by really thanking our country partners, Ghana, the Kyrgyz Republic, Lesotho, Sao Tome and Principe, and of course, our institutional partners, UNICEF, dear friends at UNICEF, as well as the foundations who have generously contributed to BELDS. This includes Comic Relief, Dubai Cares, the Hilton Foundation, and Open Society for bringing your resources together with GPE around this very, very important topic. In many ways, this is truly a terrific example of how collaboration around a critical issue really can enable the partnership to really add value. At GPE, we firmly believe that investments in education are the most effective and lead to the most equitable outcomes when they start early. And this is why we believe that early childhood education is one of the very best investments a country can make to prepare children for learning and give them a chance to thrive later in life. This is precisely what the rationale behind BELDS was, and why, since the inception of BELDS in 2016, GPE has strengthened its own capacity to support contributions to early childhood education. This has meant providing greater technical support to GPE grants that include ECCE. This is why we've engaged in collaborative initiatives and in particular sharing evidence. And this is also why early learning is a priority area within GPE's new strategy and operating model. And this is also why ECCE is one of the 6 priority areas within GPE's Knowledge and Innovation Exchange Mechanism, otherwise known as KICS. Today, we are celebrating a successful partnership. So let's just take a moment to look back over what has been achieved over the past 3 years. We've seen efforts to strengthen pre-primary education. We've seen these efforts having increased with a growing number of GPE partner countries, including ECCE, in their planning and implementation plans. In 2018, for example, 2/3 of GPE grants to partner countries included support for early childhood care and education. By the end of 2019, 81% of GPE grants supported ECCE. And several GPE countries are now using substantial portions of their implementation grants, the technical name of which are SPIGs, their implementation grants to invest in ECE programs. And this includes Sierra Leone, Uzbekistan, Cote d'Ivoire, and Zambia. And finally, we also see increases in the extent to which domestic financing has been deployed towards ECCE. So together, we've been able to strengthen both the investment and the capacity of countries to include early childhood education in their financing, their plans, and their implementation activities. Country partners have identified bottlenecks and capacity gaps in their respective contexts and prioritized the most transformative reforms for ECCE. This has resulted in improved education sector plans, the development of multi-year costed action plans, and in some cases, strengthened the content of new grants supporting early childhood education. Finally, we've been able to convene and build knowledge and good practice in a number of ways. The first included the first massive open online course on systems planning for ECCE in 2019. And this included, and this was much to our surprise, the number of people attending, over 3,600 participants in this MOOC course on planning for ECE. And then also with the launch of the toolkit by GPE and UNICEF, it's another example of how we're looking to contribute to the dialogue. So today we celebrate this launch of this very innovative tool for scaling up. I would like to thank the World Bank, EDCAN, and UNICEF for all of their work. I'd also like to encourage our foundation partners to continue to corral their resources with GPE to help invest in high-quality early primary education. Finally, I think that we can celebrate the success as we move to using the tool. It's very much an example of GPE in action. It's also an example of our commitment to equity in action, because we all know that early childhood is the way to begin to chip away at some of the inequities that we all know are there in education. I'd like to end by drawing everyone's attention to GPE's Replenishment campaign, which is very much in high gear. It will come to its commitment moment this summer at the end of July as part of the G7. And I'd like to invite everybody on the call to do your best to help the partnership as a whole be successful so that we can continue to invest in this critical area that we all know will give every child the best start in life. So let me thank you all very much, and thank you, Elizabeth, and back over to you. Take care.
Thank you, Alice, for sharing GPE's commitment to early childhood education and for everything that you do for children. I would now like to invite Robert Jenkins, who is the Chief of Education and Associate Director at UNICEF headquarters. Please introduce your colleague Felicity, who is the Deputy Regional Director, after you speak. Thank you. Over to you, Robert.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. I'm just confirming you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
So thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues and friends. Let me begin also by warmly expressing our sincere appreciation to GPE, to Alice herself, Alice Albright, dear friend and colleague, and also our key partners in the ECD Action Network, those of you who are working at country level, partner organizations with UNICEF. We sincerely appreciate this partnership. And as Alice had mentioned, this is a great expression of a successful partnership now that we can see such progress and this initiative, such an important initiative, moving to scale. As we have just heard, in order to make ECE a routine part of every child's education journey, pre-primary education must continue and become an integral part of the broader education system landscape. I know something that we all feel strongly about. We see that mainstreaming ECE in education sector planning is one of the key solutions, and solutions to enabling all children to begin school ready. And I won't go into all the very strong evidence that basically reassures us or assures us of the importance of children starting ready to school as they enter school in order to be successful, and how that very much correlates with their success throughout their learning journey. The piloting of the BELDS approach in these countries has shown very promising results. And from the global perspective, these key pilots are highlighting to all of us the, again, importance of leveraging education sector planning processes, but also strengthening the ECE subsector in the strategic engagement in that process. The emphasis on capacity building that Alice also mentioned is critically important. And part of that is engaging directly with parents and families. And we recognize how critical it is, this engagement, as part of the expanding of ECE and early childhood education. Especially, we've been once again, it's been reconfirmed to us the importance during this crisis of related to COVID. The approach of integrating ECE into sector planning, we have seen across many, many countries, and we see it expanding very quickly. We already have now a new cohort of countries exploring this approach, linked to the KICS project that Alice mentioned, including in Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Tajikistan, and we see many more countries are moving along this important journey. And to support countries' efforts, I am really excited to announce, and I know many of you have seen the ECE Accelerator Analysis and Planning Toolkit. This is an easy-to-use toolkit to enable exactly what we've been discussing, integrating ECE in national planning processes. We're going to hear more about the toolkit later during this discussion, but I do invite you to access it and share your feedback and continue to engage as we continually modify and improve the tool and learn lessons from its implementation. So without further ado, let me now hand over to a dear friend and colleague, UNICEF's Deputy Regional Director for West Africa and West and Central Africa region, Dr. Félicité Chiendabdet, and she will share quick reflections on the BELDS piloting experience. And as I was mentioning, these experiences are providing such a wealth of information and evidence to enable us to scale up across the globe. Félicité, over to you.
Thank you so much. Excellency ministers and government representative, dear colleagues from United Nations System Agency, dear partner, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with a warm thanks from Madame Marie-Pierre Poirier, UNICEF Regional Director from West and Central Africa, who unfortunately could not join us today. In this unprecedented time with COVID-19 having disturbed our lives, our families, and our community, it is really a great honor to participate in the launching of the Early Childhood Education Toolkit and to join this broad range of partners around a very important topic, early childhood education. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know the importance of investing in the early years of the child's life because it is a critical moment to build a strong foundation for children's health, happiness, growth, and learning achievement at school. The stepping stones that will help children develop, thrive, and contribute to the prosperity of their families and community. Universal early childhood education is one of the first building blocks that a child needs, giving children a good start for their lifelong learning. Quality pre-primary services strengthen trust between community members and their government and narrow economic and educational inequality gaps, especially for young children living with disabilities and those in humanitarian settings. Why this launching is important from my region. In 2014 and 2019, 2 regional learning assessments in 10 West and Central Africa countries were conducted by PASEC, the Program for the Analysis of Educational System of the Conference of Education Ministers in the Francophonie. Those assessments show that children who have benefited from pre-primary education were 12% more performant in acquiring basic language skills and 7% more performant in acquiring mathematics skills. In addition to setting solid foundation for learning, safe pre-primary education gives families the opportunity to work and be productive. The return on investment is huge. For each dollar invested in pre-primary education, there's $16 in return annually. So in 2019, UNICEF published the first global report on pre-primary education, calling for 4 actions to strengthen and scale up pre-primary education. Firstly, the increase in investment in pre-primary education with at least 10% of the education budget from government and donor allocated to pre-primary education. Secondly, the adoption of a systematic approach with defined quality standard for pre-primary services. Thirdly, advocacy for the leadership of Ministry of Education and Finance to support pre-primary education system with at least 1 year of pre-primary exposure to make all children ready for school. And fourthly, ensuring that vulnerable populations are not left behind. Where are we in our region? Only 18% of young children in the region attend pre-primary schools. Children from better off households are 7 times more likely to attend pre-primary school than those from poor households. So pre-primary education is mandatory in only 4 countries in West and Central Africa. Ghana is the only country offering a free compulsory pre-primary education. So much more needs to be done if we want to achieve universal pre-primary education. However, accelerated progress is possible when adequate tools are used, such as the Early Childhood Accelerator Toolkit. During the past 3 years, UNICEF in West and Central Africa have supported Ghana and Sao Tome and Principe in piloting the toolkit. Indeed, these 2 countries have now strong pre-primary education national strategies integrated into education sector plans endorsed by the government, have successfully strengthened their national capacity in planning, costing, and financing early childhood education program. The representative of the government of Ghana will explain in detail what was achieved in his country. Ladies and gentlemen, because I am convinced that investing in quality education programs that are relevant to the need of all children from early childhood builds solid foundation in social and economic growth for generations to come. I wish to reiterate UNICEF West and Central Africa commitment to continue to support government's effort in defining and implementing policies that allow each child to learn and reach his or her full potential. I cannot close my remark without thanking all partners, especially the Global Partnership for Education, the ECE Action Network, the World Bank, and all other education partners. This is an opportunity to strengthen our already fruitful collaboration in support of education program, which with context-sensitive and innovative approach, while reimagining and building better the world for children post-COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, I urge the participants of this forum to promote the use of this new toolkit, which will help strengthen our advocacy for more investment in pre-primary education. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Thank you, UNICEF. And now we move into the second part of this webinar. I would like to introduce and invite Sarah Bushi, who is the Chief Impact Officer at LEGO Foundation. She will moderate the second part of this meeting with our distinguished panelists. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. What wonderful sentiments by our opening speakers. We heard about transformation and this deep commitment to early childhood education. I'm just thrilled to be able to bring you 6 panelists who are going to speak from a country perspective and then also from the perspective of collaborators and donors on this journey that we have had to get to the Accelerator Toolkit. So let me start with some questions to representatives from government. It's my true pleasure to be able to introduce, first of all, Deputy Director for Ghana Education Services Management and Services at the Ministry of Education, Mr. Anthony Boateng. Also from the Kyrgyz Republic, Deputy Minister for Ministry of Education and Science, Ms. Nadira Dushisbekova. And then from Sierra Leone, Deputy Minister of Basic Education, of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, Madam Emily Gogra. It's such a pleasure to have the 3 of you on this call today. Let me just start with a question really directed toward understanding the situation in Ghana. Deputy Minister Boateng, could you just maybe speak a little bit to the situation in Ghana? It's one of the few countries in sub-Saharan Africa with a 2-year education policy for pre-primary education that's included in basic education, as we heard from the previous speakers. However, moving from policy to implementation has to be a tricky journey. Tell us a little bit more about the process and how the BELDS initiative has supported that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. Right, let me also make the correction that I'm the Deputy Director General of Education in Ghana and not a Deputy Minister. I don't want to take up some responsibility I don't have. Right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 decades, the Ministry of Education and Ghana Education Service in Ghana have increased national effort around early childhood, or what we call kindergarten education. However, there were issues of overage and underage enrollment, as well as inequitable access and quality. As a result, we needed to do something about the situation. Kindergarten is integrated in the education sector plan from 2018 to 2030, and the education sector medium-term development plan 2018 to 2021. But there were concerns that the uniqueness and distinctiveness of kindergarten might be overshadowed and overlooked in the broader basic education space if we do not isolate it and deal with it as a specific subsector. This is where the better early learning development at scale, innovative diagnostic and planning process played a key role to ensure that the early childhood education subsector was carefully looked at so that we can address the challenges in a more comprehensive and systematic manner. With the BELS approach, we embarked on a journey to develop a comprehensive early childhood education policy framework that consists of one, an early childhood education policy directive, a detailed costed early childhood education operational plan, and accompanying monitoring and evaluation framework, all key and aligned with the education sector plan and medium-term development plan. The journey started with a collaborative diagnostic workshop with key stakeholders and partners, such as planning officer, development partners, and the rest. The workshop focused on the use of pre-primary subsector analysis tool, which is a key tool of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, to identify key priority challenges and brainstorm initial strategies to address these challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, as a result of these workshops, the result of these workshops was the creation of a core technical working group. This core technical working group consisted of officials of Ghana Education Service, statisticians, early childhood education and monitoring and evaluation experts, researchers, program officers, and other critical staff from key non-governmental organizations and donor agencies, and which serve as a technical group and champions for early childhood education. This group was critical, taking forward the task of developing the early childhood education policy framework, with management persons leading and approving at every stage. Over the course of almost 2 years, the core technical team convened regularly and through an interactive process to unpack it, come up with a costed action plan. I am pleased that this journey led us to a finalized early education policy framework, which we have begun to implement this year. To support the implementation, we have also developed a guide which includes the next steps for implementing the costed action plan. But the major lessons we have learned from this process, ladies and gentlemen, have been, one, that early childhood education deserves particular focus. Even though the early childhood education subsector in Ghana is well anchored in the basic education space, we need to be mindful that young children learn in a very different way than older children, and their learning and development needs require unique and specific attention. The early childhood education subsector challenges and strategies need to be clearly and systematically articulated while being connected and aligned with the broader education sector strategies and goals. Two, the importance of the core technical team, which led the process, maintained enthusiasm and commitment, and presented the early childhood education policy framework at key moments. For example, like the annual education sector review, high-level management meetings, and the rest. Their engagement was key to the successful development of the early childhood education policy framework. Given their work and learnings throughout the 2-year process, they have become technical experts in the area of early childhood education and serve as champions for the early childhood education agenda. For example, the technical working group provides technical support for different agencies under the Ministry of Education. The development of the monitoring and evaluation tools and frameworks, the National School Inspectorate Authority have supported the development of tools for accreditation of the kindergarten schools in Ghana. The National Teaching Council have supported with the development of a framework for certifying early childhood education and kindergarten training institutions and resource persons. And the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment have supported the review of tools for assessing KG children. And all these have been harmonized to complement each other so that when other officers go around to monitor, they can better appreciate and understand what the tools for the KG assessment seeks to achieve through classroom observation. The Early Childhood Education Policy Framework process has created new path and demonstrated best practice for any policy process. However, I must add that this can only be achieved if there is political will backed by management and appropriate leadership. Management, of which I am part, is happy and making effort to strengthen early childhood education subsystem so that all children aged 4 and 5 years can start it right and end it right. And as long as some of us remain here, we will ensure that through the action area 1, effective project management, which is the anchor for realizing these objectives, are clearly articulated and organized. Thank you.
Thank you for those really thoughtful and very practical remarks. I think it's nice for all of us to be reminded about the specific needs of the subsector and the importance of political will and leadership in that. I want to sort of turn next maybe to some comments from Kyrgyzstan and talk a little bit to the Deputy Minister. We know that in 2018, about 39% of all 3 to 5-year-olds in Kyrgyzstan were enrolled in preschool. And before COVID, the ambition was to enroll about 80% of children in pre-primary or in preschool by 2022. Can you just talk a little bit about how the BELDS approach helped you to understand the levers of change that would help you to get to these ambitions? And in particular, give us some insight into the financing decisions or the shifts that were needed and made in that process.
Спасибо. Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги, наши партнеры, ГПЦО, ЮНИСЕФ и все другие наши партнеры. Мы рады участвовать на сегодняшней встрече. За последние десятилетия был сделан большой прогресс повышения охвата детей программами дошкольного обучения. И давайте сравним.
Programs. And we can compare 2018, only 39% of all children between ages of 3 and 5 in Kyrgyz Republic attended preschool. Then we can compare it to 2014, when it was only 17%. In 2020, and before COVID-19 impacted the education, we have set a goal to increase preschool enrollment to 80% by the end of 2022. And since March 2020, all kindergartens have been quarantined due to COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks to financial assistance from BELDS and other development donors, we have developed online video lessons for preschool children, and they are being broadcast on our national TV channel from April until now. And we transmit them nationally and regionally. That allowed more children to access online preschool and pre-primary education programs. The use of such digital technologies could contribute to achieving our national target of 80% preschool enrollment by 2022. It's for our ECE. The expansion of digital platforms will continue under KICS through the creation of a parents app and a learning passport for parents and preschool teachers, and that's a viable digital solution. Also, variable forms of preschool education will be created. For example, shift community-based kindergartens, child development centers based at libraries and other social facilities. The approach proposed by BELDS also helped the Ministry of Education and Science of the Kyrgyz Republic to identify problems in the field of quality of preschool education, such as lack of capacity of teachers and parents, the effectiveness of planning and use of financial resources allocated to the preschool education sector, monitoring and evaluation of the ECE and ways of solving these problems. These areas are included as priorities in the Education Development Strategy 2040 and the Education Action Plan 2021-2023. As part of the implementation of BELT, the state standards for preschool education has been revised with a focus on gender sensitivity, inclusiveness, diversity, and social cohesion, taking into account various varied forms of preschool education. The new state ECE standard was approved by the government in June 2020. The working group created within the BELS program in 2019 will be expanded to further work on the implementation of the 21-23 action plan with the Education Development Strategy 2040. The working group will revise all existing preschool education program and also will revise the new state standard and will be all properly aligned. There are amendments made to the law on preschool education. This law now is being under our governmental review, and we hope that in the near future it will be adopted. What financial decisions or changes were made in this process? In order to improve the efficiency of financing of preschool sector, the analysis of financing was carried out and the results were presented to the ministry. A planning guide and a reporting mechanism for the use of allocated funds were developed to enhance the capacity of national trainers, specialists of the finance department of the Ministry of Education and district education department. Trainings for trainers will be conducted, and subsequently national trainers will conduct training for all local authorities and local offices in the Kyrgyz Republic. Thank you very much.
Your comments really seem to build on the ideas that were presented by the Deputy Director General, that certainly we hear leadership is important, and the acknowledgement of the unique needs of young children in the subsector has been critical for your journey. We heard about your strong financial planning and analysis, as well as being open to responding to your changing context. I'm wondering, sort of with that in mind, if we could kind of turn to Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone is a newcomer to this approach, driven by its commitment to the equitable expansion of preschool classes in primary schools and community-based early childhood education. What are your plans to realize this commitment? And having heard from Ghana and from Kyrgyzstan, how do you expect this approach to support the expansion?
Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful and overjoyed to attend this event today. I want to thank everyone, especially the organizers of this event, and also to thank the Ghana team and the other country that has explained their experiences to us. Indeed, as a country, we have a current vision and ambition for ECE. Looking at current happenings in the country, there is a gross increase in our preschool enrollment. Comparing the previous years, there is an increase in enrollment in 2018 to 2020. This has clear evidence to confirm that we need quality, improve quality and financing for ECE. Most importantly, we know that the developmental delays in early childhood will cause adverse effects in later life, which will also have adverse impacts in the development of a country. As we are all aware, the earliest years of life, especially the first 3 years, our young children need protection, nutrition, and stimulation to build a strong foundation for a healthy and educative life, and also for our own environment. 67% of children enrolled in pre-primary schools attend schools that do not receive government support. There is recorded gross enrollment, but more children in the extreme rural areas are left behind. And as a mandate in our Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary, we have the radical inclusion policy and leaving no one behind. How can these children be left behind when governments do not have enough resources? But we are grateful to UNICEF, World Bank for their assistance in rendering preschool education to various areas in the country. In Sierra Leone, we are lucky. We have almost developed the ESP development plan, and our grant aid is UNICEF, Sierra Leone, and under the GPE, and they have also extended this program until 2021, and the ESP development is almost completed for 2021 to 2023, and we have the critical leadership being the staff of the ministry. However, these staff need to be trained, especially in budgeting and in disbursing of budgets. The experiences from our colleagues today on this BELLS program will resonate with us, and we are looking forward to a collaborative journey, which will focus on strengthening ECE in the upcoming ESP plan, accompanying the implementation plan of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit. We are going to make this as a key priority. And I want to comment, Ghana identified on working with the technical working force. As a country, we too are taking steps to establish this technical working group, which will serve as a collaborative and consultative channel for brainstorming and discussion around our ECE agenda. Indeed, the results of this education sector analysis, we want to look at it critically and will unpack in a more systematic way the key challenges of the ECE subsector. This exercise will inform our ECE strategies and activities for the education sector plan. We want also to ensure that the ECE components are well identified and integrated and articulated in the ESP this time, and operations will make a necessary input and relevant links to the other areas that will bring a broader education sector countrywide. We are happy to say that we are working with World Bank through the early years of initiative on the KICS belts. We have started the approach, and other ECE interventions such as the development of an ECE radio program for children at the age of 3 to 5 years. We will continue. We have certain things that we want to do. We want to continue to leverage the partnership in these coming months with World Bank. We will also continue with key education partners like Paul de Dakar, so that they will help us in the planning and implementation of the ESP plan. And we will also work with local education partners to help us in the implementation of the ESP. Another thing we lack is the advocacy, and which we want to strengthen, especially. And we want to strengthen the political will. Sometimes they won't meet the commitment of financing and early financing of ECE programs. And we also want to build the national and subnational capacities that all stakeholders have a common understanding and vision for ECE, because in rural areas, this do not happen. But we are happy is UNICEF is working with the community practice, especially in the rural areas. We also plan and exchange knowledge and learning with other countries, and with countries that are part of this BELT initiative, and as well as countries that are testing the BELT approach of the KICS project, and other countries in our region who are also undertaking this process. We look forward to sharing our experiences, and we hope to learn from these various groups. We are excited as a country to be part of this new cohort of countries that will work in strengthening ECE education sector as a process, and also want to test the ECE Accelerator Toolkit project. We hope our experiences will contribute to the community of practice around the innovative approach and global toolkits. Finally, I want to register and reiterate our commitments as a country to ensure that every Sierra Leonean child benefits from quality preschool education, and also have a conducive learning atmosphere. And also these children will have the required play materials for them to work with in their schools. Furthermore, it is always the case for us, for the educators, as we call them, or the preschool teachers, who will want to have an increase of well-trained and qualified preschool teachers who will support the implementation by using the proper methodology, the play-based early learning methods, and using the proper curriculum. We would also like to access the development and context-appropriate learning and play materials for all these children. Lately, we have recruited additional support staff to monitor and coach in schools. We will ensure that they are trained to support and maintain the process. Really, we are so happy that this BELT KISS program is here. We want to thank on behalf of our Sierra Leonean children, educators, and partners in education. We look forward for a good working relationship and experience sharing. We have really gained a lot from the GPE program, from UNICEF, and the children, the teachers are grateful. And with the incoming program, a lot is going to happen to address the needs of this gross enrollment in schools. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister from Sierra Leone, for sharing. Sarah, I can see Sarah is back. Let's hope your technology is working.
Let's see if you can hear me this time. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister Gogra. Can you hear me all right, Elizabeth? Good. I'm assuming that means I'm okay. Thank you for those really thoughtful and inspiring thoughts about the future of the pre-primary sector in Sierra Leone. I think we heard from both the Deputy Director General and each of the Deputy Ministers' remarks the importance of analysis and seeing the importance of really the specific needs of young children and the subsector. Even though they're on different sides of their journey, we heard also about the importance of leadership. So I was particularly struck by the last speaker and her really speaking about the importance of partnership. So with that, I just want to turn to a couple of partners in this journey, starting with Dubai Cares and Saeed Al-Ismaili, who is a program manager there. Saeed, I wonder if you can tell us, knowing about the tremendous investments that supports in early childhood education, from its positive effects on reducing inequality in a child's life and improving overall well-being, can you tell us why, despite the strong evidence and vocal advocates, 50% of pre-primary age children miss out on the opportunity? What do you think proactive roles can be to address the philanthropic sector and really advance early childhood education? Can you tell us a little bit about the lessons that you learned under belt?
Sure. I just wonder first if you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be representing the foundations that supported the BELT initiative and the toolkit. I mean, this has been kind of like repeated numerously, but I cannot reinforce more that the disruptions that were caused by COVID-19 have really put a great burden on caregivers and families to really balance between their work responsibilities and the child's development needs. We know from speaking to partners on the ground who are implementing programs that the pandemic has worsened the situation for the most marginalized and vulnerable children who are left at a more disadvantaged position. I think that now more than ever, the philanthropic sector can play a fundamental role in advocating for the advancements of early childhood. To answer your question, I think that we all couldn't agree more on the power of collaborative partnerships and collaborations, especially in supporting platforms such as BELT, for the purpose of generating data and evidence for countries, policymakers, and practitioners, while also adding to the existing body of knowledge. At the same time, we're very pleased that BELT had raised the visibility of the importance of early childhood at the global GPE level, as we acknowledge that countries also need to be reminded that ECE is a critical education sector element and not optional. The other thing that as foundations we've been really strongly discussing amongst ourselves is basically around the issue of sustainability. And we surely believe that the toolkit is one step forward towards concentrating efforts and minimizing duplication. Additionally, I think that we all realize that we need to push for more dialogues to happen on a cross-sectorial levels, given that early childhood and ECCE sits at the crossroads of various ministries that most often do not talk to each other. So we really think that the toolkit provides an opportunity to identify these existing gaps and stir these dialogues. And finally, we're very happy to see that the evidence generated from the 4 pilot countries and also the toolkit was developed and it's already getting a lot of traction and is used to inform the new GPE strategy and KICS as they work to strengthen national education systems. Thank you very much.
Those are some fantastic reflections and really give us a sense of, so if we're lifting the profile of things, how can we move forward? I want to turn next to Amanda DiVercelli, who's the global lead for early childhood development at the World Bank and the education team there. Amanda, could you just tell us a little bit about the World Bank's Early Learning Partnership? It's awarded 117 grants, 57 countries, almost 10 years since 2012. Some of these activities have also supported early childhood education subsector analysis and planning. Can you give us maybe the top 3 lessons learned from this work and how we can best leverage the different efforts, whether they be ELP or BELDS or the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, to really make progress move? Amanda,
hello, Sarah. This is Miniza. I know that Amanda's having terrible problems, so she suggested maybe you move on to me and then hopefully she'll sort it out.
Great. Well, then I'll just throw a question to you, Miniza. Thanks so much. As our regional ECD advisor for East and Southern Africa region at UNICEF, you are in a regional role. You've known BELDS from a very early start. What kind of capacity building support are ministries of education asking for as they prepare for new education sector plans? Can you just tell us in what areas you see the greatest demand and maybe how this toolkit can help meet the demand?
Great, thank you, Sarah. And yes, I worked very closely with Saeed and colleagues when I was at Open Society Foundations to design the BELDS program. And I have to say, where we go from 2016 to today, I think even we couldn't have imagined how far we would get. And since 2018, since I moved into this new role with UNICEF, we've been supporting many countries in East and Southern Africa, about 9 since 2018, on early childhood education system strengthening. And what we're seeing are 2 main things that we're being asked for. Firstly, ministries asking for support to undertake a proper systems analysis. So really trying to understand where early childhood education lands in the country and therefore what the plans and programs should be to strengthen and support it. So countries like Mozambique and Lesotho have really gone through a systemic problem solving and problem identification process in country with stakeholders, and then been able to build a very clear space for early childhood education within their education sector plans. We've also seen, Saeed mentioned some of the issues coming up, like some of the challenges around the enabling environment for early childhood. So some of our work, which is very much mirroring what the toolkit does, has been looking at the policy, the governance and the financing systems and structures for early childhood. And that's where we've seen gaps, like, for example, in Angola and Malawi, where we see early childhood education a responsibility across a number of ministries, and that brings with it some challenges. I think the greatest demand from government, though, has been, first of all, knowing the status of early childhood education, and then being able to think as a community about what to prioritize first. And I can give a really concrete example, like in South Sudan, where all government ministry relevant departments within the Ministry of Education, key partners like the World Bank, UNICEF and others, the local education group, really looked at what the challenges were for expanding early childhood education in South Sudan and recognized one problem being around family and community engagement. And that analysis has now informed a major World Bank project in South Sudan, looking at how to get better family and community engagement. In Lesotho, for example, we saw challenges around a curriculum. The early childhood curriculum hasn't been reviewed since 1998. That obviously raised some red flags, and now we see that as a priority. So I think the great thing about the toolkit is how it has these practical, interactive tools built on relevant country experience that can really facilitate a stakeholder process in country to look at early childhood education systems, to see what the opportunities are, to see what the gaps are, and to prioritize some actions moving forward. Thank you.
That was really helpful, Manisha, to give us a sense of what does it look like and how is the demand coming in. I think what's striking about that is just reiterating what we're hearing from the earlier speakers and governments about the importance of understanding and having concrete tools to move things forward. It looks like we're still waiting for Amanda to get back on track. So if she jumps back on, then we'll hear more about the Early Learning Partnership. But in the interest of time, I just want to turn to some rapid fire questions. So this will be a challenge for all of us. I'm going to give you about just 30 seconds to answer a couple of quick fire questions. So maybe in this order, if our representatives from Ghana, Kyrgyzstan, and UNICEF want to answer the question about the ECE Accelerator. This is the result of a lot of hard work done by your teams. What part of the toolkit are you most excited to have contributed to as a global resource? So could we just start with Ghana?
Right, thank you. We in Ghana are very much excited about the assessment tool to measure the children's school readiness. Over the years and in the past, we have fallen into the mistake of assessing these children's performance as if they are regular school children. The effect has been that we have not been getting the real performance level of these children. Now we do specific ECE assessments to identify how ready the children are for school. And I think that that is the most significant part that we are so excited about. Thank you.
That's a great, super concrete answer. How about if we turn to the Kyrgyz Republic? The Deputy Minister like to say something?
Да.
Well, for us, the BELS tools helped us to create a coordinating committee, which now has been expanded under the KICS authority, and it's going to work to implement action plan in education through 23. It's the strategy of educational development through 2040. And also, BELS instruments allowed us to analyze our elementary and secondary school education systems. And also, we were able to include our pre-primary education as part of education system for 21-23. Thank you.
That's great. That's a really integrated answer too. Just bumping it back over to UNICEF, Manisha, what would you say you're most excited about?
Okay, I mean, I would say that the most exciting thing for me about the toolkit is that I really believe it will facilitate very important discussions, evidence-based discussions at the country level about what exactly the education sector wants to achieve for learning and for the learning of its youngest citizens. And I think the guiding questions in the toolkit will really prompt stakeholders to consider how well, for example, early childhood education is covered in sector analysis and sector plans. And I believe that that will inevitably prompt really important conversations around early childhood education governance and financing and workforce capacity. And this in itself will really force, I think, a rethink about a very neglected subsector. So I'm super excited about the conversations this will lead to.
That's a great response. And it sort of leads back, I think, to what we can maybe ask Amanda to answer. I see she's back on the call. Amanda, I gave an overview of the impressive breadth and depth of the work of the ELP. I'm just wondering if you could share with us maybe the top 3 lessons learned from this work and how we can best leverage all of the different efforts that are out there to accelerate progress.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. And sorry, everybody, about the connection troubles. So I think the first lesson I want to highlight is that evidence matters and that we need to be strategic about how we generate that evidence and the timing of generating that evidence. So we really need to be planning ahead, and that's why this sector planning is so important to kind of generate that evidence upstream so that it's ready. I'll give an example from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, the ELP made a grant of $44,000 in 2019 to support a landscape assessment of pre-primary education. Not surprisingly, that landscape assessment found that children were 37% more likely to be developmentally on track if they had attended preschool. But it also found that the quality of pre-primary education was hampered by a shortage of qualified teachers, inadequate curriculum, and pedagogy and classroom practices. So the quality of that work and the timing of that work was such that it could be used then to feed into the education sector planning process in Bangladesh. And the evidence really helped make the case to highlight early childhood education within that sector plan. And eventually, within the sector plan, that evidence was used to add an additional year of pre-primary education officially into basic education in Bangladesh, to launch a new training and certification program for pre-primary teachers and school leaders, and to secure funding for early childhood education within the $60 million ESPIG project, which the World Bank supports the government of Bangladesh to implement using GPE finance. So that's a great example of how some well-placed upstream effort to generate evidence can really be used to make the case to support early childhood education and sector planning. Now that the project is moving forward and these new approaches are moving forward in Bangladesh, we've made another grant of $99,000 to support technical assistance and evaluation and course correction as the approach rolls out, so that we can keep getting information on how well the teacher training is working, how it can be adjusted, how the new curriculum is going. So that's lesson one, right? So generate evidence and think about it from an upstream perspective so that it's ready when you need it. The second point I wanted to make is that, it's also goals that assess, the constraints and the capacity and the resources available and come up with realistic approaches to scale quality early childhood education within education sector planning processes. So in Chad, we have an early years fellow who works with the World Bank and the government and partners. Right now, he's conducting a supply side and a demand side analysis to understand the determinants of early childhood education in Chad, looking at the resource constraints, what's possible, to help work with partners to set realistic goals in the education sector plan and to feed into that process. The third point is that I think, and this was certainly highlighted in Deputy Director Boateng's remarks from Ghana, is that the process needs to be led in country. Country leadership is critical, but as partners, we can coordinate and we can help support that process. And if we coordinate with each other, it makes it much easier for government. So certainly early on in my career, I can think back and realize I made a lot of mistakes of thinking like, oh, we'll just develop a plan and that's all we need and it'll be ready and it'll be used. And I think that taking the time to do the planning in a participatory way with the government in the driver's seat is key. And that's where I think BELDS can help and be an important part of that process. One of the things we've done through the Early Learning Partnership that we think has been really successful is to launch the Early Years Fellowship, which I know many of you are familiar with. It's a program that recruits young professionals to work in their home country for 2 years with governments, World Bank, and partners to support early childhood across sectors in the country. While doing the work, they are also enrolled in extensive professional development programs so that we're really building their future capacity to lead in the space. Our current cohort of 25 fellows was selected from 2,500 applicants, and we're really proud that 25% of them actually returned from abroad to their home countries to participate in the program. And these fellows have been critical in boosting that capacity and supporting partner and government coordination. So in Rwanda, for example, the fellows conducting a landscape analysis on pre-primary education, which utilizes the conceptual framework for pre-primary spending that UNICEF has developed. And that will feed into a public expenditure review that will then feed into the education sector planning and future projects in Rwanda. And I think my final point is that funder collaboration takes time and effort. It requires good faith and a reflection on our comparative advantages. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that means saying, we're not good at this, you're better at this, or let's work together. We had planned to do this, but we'll drop it and you take it on. And that's something that we've really valued over the years, working with with our partners. UNICEF in particular, we've done a really good job of trying to map different approaches in countries where we have stronger staff or work programs that are more able to move forward early childhood education and really divvying up approaches. And certainly I know Maniza mentioned South Sudan. That's a place where we've been focusing more on partnering with UNICEF on parent engagement and playful parenting. And I think UNICEF has been focusing more on the education sector planning, but that coordination has been really critical to make sure that we don't duplicate efforts and we complement each other. So let me stop there and just say thanks for this great discussion today. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks so much, Amanda. We heard some similar themes that we've heard throughout the conversation around partnership, collaboration, leadership, the importance of analysis. Nice real evidence reference in there as well. I want to be conscious of time, but I just want to turn to this rapid fire again and ask another question of the three panelists that didn't get a rapid fire question. So this time, Deputy Minister Gogra, Dubai Cares and the World Bank, my question to you is, if the ECE Accelerator is designed as a living resource that will continue to grow with additional tools and resources over the coming years, what types of tools and guidance would you find beneficial to be added to it? So let's just start with the Deputy Minister from Sierra Leone, then go to Dubai Cares and end off with the World Bank.
Thank you very much. The tool I would like you to include is the tool for the policy for the three documents wherein we have the ECD policy, the minimum standards, and the curriculum, especially the curriculum wherein we practice the playway. And I would also like you to include the technical working group tool, which serves as an advocacy for and also a consultative channel that will help in the interior, especially because we always have problems in our country with the rural areas. But with the technical group, we'll make it formidable according to Ghana's plan, and then we shall establish in a more formidable way. Thank you. Over to you.
Very concrete, thanks. Let's move to Dubai Cares.
The three things that I can think of immediately is basically perhaps country-specific guidelines or tools to further support national and global coordination. Also tools to ensure that we have financial data that will be needed to hold governments and donors accountable. And the last thing is basically a point that Amanda already has mentioned, is basically we just need to ensure that we are minimizing the duplication of efforts and ensuring closer and tighter coordination with networks that are doing similar work. So yeah, thank you.
Great. And Amanda, do you have some thoughts?
I'll pick up on that last point on collaboration and networks, because I think one of the things we're so fortunate to have in the early childhood community is great regional networks who have longstanding relationships with governments and experience. And so I think thinking of ways to bring in the regional networks to this work and having them help serve as platforms and connections and spaces to carry forward with this work will be important. And then the two other pieces I wanted to raise is picking up on my earlier comment. I think a way to allow for really candid discussion across countries and partners on what's working, but also what's not working, and create safe spaces for those conversations, because lots of things don't work and we should learn from them and share them and, you know, move forward from them. So creating an honest space for those. And then I think the last point is on costing. So, you know, costing is really important, but notoriously difficult in early childhood. But I think if we can get more information on unit costs, on incremental costs, and on quality improvement costs, I think that will be really important to understand. Okay, you have the basics in place. You have you paid your teachers' salaries. You have a basic training program. But what's it going to cost to kick it up a notch and improve quality? And how much are you going to get an improvement in quality? Is it cost effective? So I think tools that let us look at that will be really important. Thanks.
Great, some really concrete things and a great roadmap for how to continue to build out the toolkit. I think the answers to those questions also bring about for everybody on the call this tension that we have between being enormously contextual and supportive and then also being able to draw learnings across at a global level in order to build on tools and not recreate things. I just want to kind of turn to and acknowledge that there were over 700 thoughtful questions that came in ahead of this event, and we only have a chance to answer a few of them. So I'm going to pull out just a couple, maybe starting with Kanupriya from Children in Crossfire. Kanupriya asks, in your opinion, what is the biggest bottleneck to achieving universal ECE in your geographical context? I wonder if any of our representatives from governments would like to take that question. Can I ask Ghana?
Yes. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah, I think that one of the major bottlenecks has been, I will identify two of them. The first being funding, and of course, the other being how do we engage families and communities to support early childhood education provision. We believe that the issue of getting families and communities to support early childhood education is very critical. In Ghana, we have identified that gap, and that's what we are working on now, so that once we get the community and the family to appreciate and support early childhood education, much of the challenges will be overcome. The other side has had to do with funding. Honest with you, the percentage of funding for early childhood education subsector, we in Ghana are doing around 15%. And we think that it is not releasing enough resources to support that sector. We intend to use both the technical working group and other advocates to urge and campaign for much more resource flow for that sector so that we can have much more flexibility in providing the needed support that sector requires. Thank you.
Great answer. Thinking about social norms as well as funding. Maybe just turning toward one last question, and then I think we're going to close.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I give
please
a view of us in Sierra Leone?
It would be wonderful.
But for us, what we are looking at is poor parenting. In Sierra Leone, a lot of parents do not care for their children, especially in these early ages. They do not give them early stimulation, and they leave them at the detriment of other older siblings at home. And we want to look at also the political will. For us in Sierra Leone, there is no special budget. Even if they make the budget, they will say we have 22% of the country's budget, but no specific budget is being allocated to ECE. So we have to work on some of these things. And we also want to look at the poor preparation of sending children to school. Children do not have the readiness. And it's only the remedy of UNICEF coming to the aid of the school-based program, creating that early stimulation in children that will help them to prepare them to go into formal schooling. So these are areas we need to work on. Thank you. Over, please.
Thank you. Those are sharp insights and sort of echo some of those other things. I think it's a really critical point that parents and families understanding what their role is and really having and giving that early stimulation and playful experience where children can learn and grow. I'm so conscious of time and just want to apologies to Minister Desipakova. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to this question?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists. I just want to shift and turn it over to Joe Bourne, who's the Chief Technical Officer at the Global Partnership for Education. It's been a pleasure to speak with all of the panelists today. And Joe, you've got a tough sum up to do. Lots of good thoughts here. Over to you.
Sarah, thank you so much. And it's just so good to see everybody talking about this on the call. Everyone's insights were fantastic. This has been a journey, as we know. I want to say thank you, of course, to the 4 contributing foundations to BELD, so Comic Relief, Dubai Cares, Hilton Foundation and Open Society. And of course, thanks to colleagues at UNICEF who've been on this journey for a while. I've been with them, and the work that they have done with our government partners in Ghana, Kyrgyz Republic, Lesotho, Sao Tome and Principe to develop and really test out this interactive ECE Accelerator Toolkit. Like Sarah said, a huge thank you to everyone who's joined this session or has sent in questions. It's really great to see this level of enthusiasm and interest in sharing global knowledge and resources and practices on scaling equitable and quality early childhood education. And what really excites us, we know the task is daunting. 175 million children are still out of pre-primary, and that number is likely to increase as part of the impact of the pandemic. We know that governments are struggling to make the best use of ever shrinking resources to provide early childhood education. We know why this matters. Everybody knows how important this is. But what we're now talking about is those practical steps to get to that improvement at scale. What do we do first? What do we do second? And that's really exciting to have that conversation. So my kind of 3 takeaways, and forgive me if I've got these wrong. What I'm hearing, first of all, is this really strong ambition to scale ECE and this need for customization as a recipe to build these strong education systems. So we're hearing this political will, but we're also hearing that what was important with the BELD's work in particular was it was responsive to country needs and to particular gaps that were identified by those countries during this initial diagnostic stage of these workshops, and a couple of our ministers talked about how important those were. I think the second big message, and a number of you have said it, is this power of collective partnership and collaborations for catalytic change. The financing from our 4 foundation partners was relatively small, but has been quite catalytic if we now start to take stock of the conversation that we're now having and what we're now seeing across various countries. The partnership between GPE and UNICEF, of course, has been very important, but we're now also seeing this stronger partnerships with the World Bank's EPL, with ECDAN. But most importantly, as Amanda said, those partnerships and collaborations are being worked out at country level because we all have different comparative offers and advantages. So how do we best make those partnerships and collaborations come behind that leadership and that diagnosis that we're seeing at country level? And a third point really is this demand for evidence, the importance of evidence and the importance of continual knowledge sharing on how countries are scaling ECE whilst maintaining quality, whilst reaching the poorest communities and within constrained budgets, and continuing to share those experiences and learn from those experiences. And I thought that last question about, what aspects of the toolkit were working for you and what would you like to see more of as a living resource was a really good example of that sort of thirst for knowledge and evidence, but how that's being shared. I'll end very briefly. As many of you know, GPE just launched or is finishing its new strategy for 2020 to 2025, and a lot of what is underneath that is this thinking around how can we best tailor all of our support to the reform priorities of our partner countries, and be really country driven and very much committed to both looking at how we can use our instruments, our grants, KICs and EOL to support the country directions. A really important part of that is how we work on facilitating stronger country partnerships, and that can be with foundations applications. We've introduced a new matching funding to do that. But, you know, critically, it's also about strengthening the coordination at country level, which is something Amanda also talked about. So I'm excited to see GPE hopefully being really poised to help respond to the demand from country governments that they want to shift the dial on this particular issue, and that we increasingly have the partnerships, the financing, and the technical tools to be able to do that. And then finally, today's event was really just the launch of the new toolkit, the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, but we know there's a lot of interest. So I want to invite you to a series of practical hands-on webinars that delve deeper into the toolkit. The first will be on Tuesday, March the 2nd, and this will be an introductory webinar. It will give an overview of the background, purpose and content of the toolkit, and also hopefully an opportunity to answer some of the questions that didn't get answered today that were shared in advance of the meeting. And you can register for that at ecdan.org. And with that, I would close. Am I handing back to you, Sarah, or to Elizabeth? I think she's gone, but I will just say thank you very much for everybody's excitement and engagement in today's session.
Thanks, Joe. I think that ends us out. So thank you very much again to all of the panelists.